You are listening to Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. Hobby with reckless abandon.
Why, hello, and welcome to Season 26, Episode 18? 18 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
This is Happy.
I am Bill.
And this is Tomes.
Well, hi, guys. How you guys doing?
Good. I am excited. This is like the first time in, 3 years.
Oh,
or
yeah.
something crazy.
Probably.
That I've been on. And all it took was Kimmy having a baby and a global pandemic to get me back on the show. So that's pretty good.
I finally had to figure out how to do remote hosts. I was dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century. I should probably... Hi. In this episode of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast, Andreas sends us some thoughts on game prices and PC preferences. Joe Crack sends us his comments on GMing at conventions, and Jonas asks us about pre-written adventures. But first, if you'd like to email us, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. And by the way, if we don't start getting emails, next week's show will be the last one, because we have 3 emails in the queue. That's it.
What else are you doing? You're home.
Right.
Write emails. Come on.
Exactly. If you'd like to go to our forum or join our forum if you're not a member, happyjacksforum.com. That's happyjacksforum.com. We're on the social media, meteors, happyjacksrpg, all one word, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and MeWe. And we live stream, and if you'd like to watch the show live, we do so at 7:13 p.m.-ish Pacific time, daylight time right now, at happyjacks.org/live. And that's that. So, now, I haven't been reading any emails unless someone doesn't want to read, so, because there are 4 hosts and 3 emails. So, who would like to read the first email, the rant, and a question from Andreas?
Rock, paper, scissors.
All right.
Rochambeau?
1, 2, 3, bam.
Oh, we both did that. We did 1, 2, 3, shoot.
Why
Right?
isn't Tappy doing a thing?
Because he's gonna let us fight. Oh, for the
Yeah, I'm gonna let you guys
All right,
fight.
So we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, shoot. Right?
Yes.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, shoot. Oh, all right.
All right.
Means you get to read, right? Because you won.
Yes, so. Damn it, Bill. All right.
Otherwise, you're
A
saying
rant?
that our emails are only for losers, and I know you're not saying it.
I'm not saying that.
Okay.
A rant and a question from Andreas. Hi, Stu and the crew. First, a rant. I felt I had to write in and add my voice to the caller who called in and talked about games being free, or what they should cost. If we consider what it pays to write for gaming compared to other kinds of creative writing, it's pretty clear writing for gaming is a terrible way to earn some money. The pay is really, really low on average. If we want a society where people should be able to live on their wages, even on low-paying jobs, we should rise those wages considerably if we want professional game writing to be a thing. Most game writers these days also run Patreon campaigns, which underlines how badly paid they are. If we add to this the amount of value you get from a game product, like a campaign, source book, or rules book, it becomes clear that a fair price for a game book should probably be double what it is today, at least. That's, sorry, that's me, that's Tomes. But most gamers are cheapskates.
Uh-huh.
Cheap skates, I should say. They expect games to be cheap, or preferably free. Worst of all, they bitch about the high costs online. Personally, I find that quite offensive. Sum up what you spend on gas and snacks for the game night and give that money to the artists and writers who made the game instead. That was the rant.
Should we talk about that first before we go into his question?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Good one.
What do you guys think?
I'm going to say this. I just got my COVID-19 refund check, and I'm in an okay place where we don't need that money. That money, I mean, it's a lot, and I could use it to stuff. Don't get me wrong, but I don't need it, right? And so I looked at that $2,900 refund check from my federal government and said, how can I give this to other people? And a big chunk of it is going into me and Jay's gaming supply budget, where we can just like spend like crazy.
Now,
And just buy a bunch of these games.
Are you talking about your tax refund?
I'm talking about my tax refund.
Oh, okay.
So I'm figuring that's one way that I can help. Like every year I spend a significant amount of money on RPGs, like a lot of
Right.
smaller indie stuff and Kickstarters and, a couple Patreons and stuff like that. And I just do my little part, but now I get to feel like I do a better part. So like if you've got that refund check and you don't need it, this is one way to help distribute it to those who do. We also donated to like Feeding America and that kind of shit. But like,
food for people too.
That's food.
Right.
No, I'm with you, right? From the standpoint that one of the things that has been a change for me is I spend way more time on social media now than I have in the past, and especially Twitter. Like I usually spend a lot of time on Facebook and not very much on Twitter. And I spend a ton on Twitter now, and the vibrancy of the tabletop RPG community there is incredible.
Yeah.
And the creators that are there are just fantastic. And I've seen so many more just things being done. And whether those are indie games or whether those are supplements or whether those are like, here's my D&D 5e thing that's out. And not only is that streaming, which is a ridiculous amount of stuff that's happening in terms of streaming, but people writing stuff and creating content. And so I kind of same thing. I looked at my budget and said like, hey, I'm not driving anywhere right now. I'm not eating out, right? I've got just some disposable income. There's a lot of different ways to distribute that in a good way. One of them is I've joined some Patreons that I want to support people that are out creating and writing, right? And getting really cued into more traditionally like marginalized communities, right? So supporting people of color and supporting people, of different genderings and just supporting female writers and whatever it is. So it's not just, I'm going to buy some more D&D stuff.
Right.
No offense, Watsy, but it's just like, you're getting everybody's money already. Here's a bunch of people doing really cool stuff. And the reason all those things are in place is because these writers don't make money, even when they work for big companies, right? Writers' remuneration is not high. And that's a problem. That's a big problem because it's not just putting words on paper. A lot of times it's like, it's more than even the fluff, which takes a lot of work to get that. But if they start actually making the game systems, if they're figuring out those mechanics, right, that's a ton of work.
Oh,
and you look at what goes into it and, they're out there like, hey, could I just get $3 for this thing? And people are like, nah, I don't want to pay that. Like, wow, that's like so much time from them. If they were breaking that down into an hourly rate, it's ridiculous.
Oh yeah, I mean, the weird thing is, I remember, I won't say who it was, but we know of a band that is sort of a mutual friends that did Patreons for their CD, and I was talking to the leader of the band, and he's very proud, and he said that every penny they spent on the Kickstarter got sunk into the product, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, what about you and your time? I mean, you got to be compensated. The whole band, I mean, you got rehearsal time and songwriting time and all kinds of stuff that you're not getting compensated for. And I think that there's a lot of people out there when it comes to crowdfunding sites who get real sort of uppity about, oh, you better spend it all and you better not keep any of it for yourself and blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? I see that every so often, and I'm like, what? Stop being a dick. I mean, these people need to eat, right? They have to survive. They're not.
And a lot of those projects
just
are not profitable.
Right, and it's
Right.
not just their time, right? It's their talent.
Yeah.
It's their ability. How are you not giving somebody proper money for that?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why we should start talking more about authors and less about systems. When we instead of talking about Deadlands, we should talk about Shane Hensley, right?
Right.
Instead of if we're talking about, we can talk about like Mark Ryan Hagen's games, like Ars Magica and shit like that, because you also see stuff that they do consistently throughout their game systems, and kind of becomes a very interesting conversations of what types of games or what types of mechanics or how does this specific creator's mind work, and then you can start looking at comparing that to other ones. It becomes a much more interesting conversation, I think, than just what is better, Traveler or Star Trek game systems?
Traveler.
Yeah.
And so
yeah,
once we
I
all
agree.
start talking about like, yeah, well, that is the correct answer. But once we start talking about this, like who wrote Traveler? Who's the lead for it? I love that system.
I can tell
All
you
right,
who wrote
I'm
the
ready.
original, but I can't tell
this
you.
This is the episode I wanted to come on. Can I
So,
share
like-
an example of some of these recommendations? So just
Go.
from my perspective,
Go,
because
go,
like, you know,
go,
I come
go,
on every
baby,
once in
go.
a long while. Okay. If you do follow some of the RPG stuff on Kickstarter, are you guys aware of Zine Quest?
No.
So like Kickstarter last year did Zine Quest, which is like, hey, people, do a zine as a Kickstarter, you know, like smaller budget, smaller production, maybe more people feel comfortable doing it, so it's not such a big thing. Smart move. The RPG community went crazy on that. And so there was like prolific numbers of designers around settings, systems, mini games, all sorts of bullshit on little zines. So it was like $5 or $10. You can get just a PDF, or they would send you a zine, which was awesome. And that was like a big thing last year, and they did it again this year. If you check out Kickstarter Zine Quest, you will just find like a plethora of different cool, smaller design stuff. And some of it is just like modules for D&D or other things. Some of it is more like, no, here's a little mini game that's all its own thing. Or, hey, you know this game Masks that's really popular? This is a thing for that, right? Or whatever. So that was cool. RPGC, SEA, Southeast Asia. That is a hashtag that you'll find on Twitter. There are some amazing designers coming out of that community. In Malaysia and the Philippines are the two bigger countries represented in RPGC, like Indonesia. But there's like some other designers around the entire, you know, Southeast Asia area, right? That's what the C stands for. And then specifically in that area is something called 1,000,000 Islands. So on Happy Jacks, I've streamed a couple of games like Merkurger or whatever, right? And they're like these weird, it's basically these two guys in Malaysia writing a Southeast Asian inspired fantasy setting. So instead of a European inspired thing, they're from Malaysia, they grew up there, and they took their mythos and then like massaged it and made like a bunch of worlds. And so you get this fantasy setting that's inspired by their culture, but it's like also made up shit, right? It's all sorts of weird poetic silliness, right? And it's amazing. So I would recommend that. And finally, like, yeah, go seek out some Patreons. There's amazing designers out there making money. I started as just like an enthusiast. Now I am someone who lives with a game designer. So my partner Jay has been writing games, and she's doing like a game jam right now that's due like, I don't know, tomorrow or some bullshit. And it's been like a thing. Like, it's interesting to see it from that perspective. She is not making any kind of real money, obviously, but she's also new to the scene, but like doing amazing work. And like, she's putting stuff out. There's all these conversations about paying designers and how much should you charge? Like, the temptation is to put it for free because you don't think it's worth anything and you don't think anyone will pay for it. But understanding kind of like how much time and effort you put into it, putting a cost of value on it, like $5 or whatever. And especially with low, like easy to set up and sell places like itch.io is like the place where all the indie games are being posted now, not Drive-Thru. Drive-Thru is still the big money maker. That's where you get the crowd seeing your stuff. But itch is like the mini indie designer space. Like, you can kind of, there's a little bit of that going on. So that's another place to check out. And of course, I'm going to plug my partner, itch.io/jgrants. That's her games that she's working on. But,
So
and
it's,
I get to be a consultant on those. So like, I feel like they're a little bit my games too.
So it's really interesting you mentioned that, right? Because it's one of the things I think is also challenging is it's a tight enough margin if you're a writer or a designer, right? But then you go through the distribution networks, right? And like you said, like RPG, Drive-Thru, tons of eyes over there, but they take a big chunk, right? itch.io is getting more. I don't know what their policy is.
It's a slower margin. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
they have
margin.
a slower cost.
Right. And then, you know, but it all feels like it builds up to the point like, can I do a Kickstarter? Because that's where I'm going to potentially retain the most, right? But then to Stu's point earlier, people get into that mindset there where like, oh, well, maybe I better drive all the money that I'm making off of my Kickstarter back into the product, right? So it becomes this double dip of almost like imposter syndrome as writers and designers, where it's like, oh, is my stuff good enough? Can I charge for it? Should I charge for it? Right. And then that gets piled on by the distribution cut. Right. So I just, Elspeth, who's a happy jacker from way back, and my wife, we started our own little tabletop company called Wonder Monkey. And we just put our first thing out. I did it through drive-through because I did it as part of the community creation content for Shock Traveler, because I love Traveler. And it's a good 34-page supplement that's career paths, and it's got all kinds of cool tables and weapons and powers. It's to plug that, it's Knights of Solaris, which is basically if you want to have space wizards with star swords. You should add that is not an IP bound by anybody else. You should put those in there. And I was like, I don't know, what should I charge for it? I talked with Dave Kazay, right? And he was basically saying he's like, yeah, he looked at it. He's like, $5 is reasonable. Like, that's probably the right price. I'm like, okay. And, they take half by being up there. Yeah. I will never make what I spent on putting that together, right? Not even my time. I'm removing my time and my talent and my ability from it because I got art in it and I had it typeset professionally because I wanted to be a good piece, and I paid those people what they should be paid, right? Now, I realize I'm in a unique position, right? Because I wanted the first thing out to be kind of cool and fun and look good, and be representative. And I am very fortunate in that I've had a good career designing games on the video game side, right? So that's been great. I could create something and realize I'm going to take a loss on it. But man, if this is the thing that I was doing, where I was like, this is how I'm going to try to figure out how to make money, brutal. Oh yeah, brutal. And we're trained by that. I mean, I think one of the other things that's hurt creative content for tabletop players is the mindset that comes from mobile games, which is like, I want a massive amount of content for free. Just give me free stuff. I want free. Give me free. Right. And if I don't, then you're not giving it to me free, I'll get someone else's free thing. Right. So the consumer, the person who's buying it, the fan, is thinking that way already going in. And it's just something that, like, I don't know. I don't have a good solution how we change that. But I love to hear about like itch.io and the fact that you got people there and Kickstarter's doing jams. Like, it's got to be something where, just like in the indie space and video games, right? Like, you've got to have publishers, you got to have these people that actually have the resources step up and help support this content getting done and make sure these people have a pathway to actually generate revenue from that to be able to do it as a living, or else it all goes away.
Yeah. I mean, right now, I think that for the vast majority of game designers, it's more of a hobby that maybe gets them a little money rather than a way to make a living.
So I think there's like I've rambled a little bit, but there's a couple more little points. One, I think that's a great point about if you have friends and and they're in that field, like that's a good place to go to see, how to market and how much to market your games for. Because you don't want to undersell them, right? So like talking to like a David Kazay, for example, who like knows what that market is, boom, you can get an answer. If you don't know what that answer is and you don't have somebody like that, I would recommend going onto Twitter and following some people who are talking about that kind of thing. I am very bad of memory, but I will remember this. Like, you might want to start with D Pennyway. They are a Twitter person, and they have a lot of conversations about specifically how much to sell your game for, and like how to think about those things. It's not going to give you an answer like, hey, $3. But it's going to say like, how do you think about this thing, and how do you value it, and how do you want to market that kind of to the community? And that's it, right? It's like those conversations. And there's other people talking about that, but if you start with them, I'm sure they'll point you at other people. You'll be good. And then finally, there are communities that help support this kind of stuff. So like you guys, for example, like you're streaming other people's games, and not all those games are big games, right? Like that's a combination of like other stuff. So this is one of the ways that happens, right? That you get money to these designers. And I think like it's commendable, like this kind of shit that you guys are doing. Like you're not doing it where you're only playing the games that'll pay you, like some kind of public, you know what I mean? Like it's not advertisement, and that it's love of the game. And I think that shows, right? People want to see that. I'll like recommend one other spot. If you're a smaller indie designer, you could look at like the Gauntlet Codex is one example. There's like these zines that come out and they pay the writers a pretty good number, like per word for the game and different things like that. But not just that, you retain the rights to your game. And that's the main thing you want to do is, yes, they're promoting me as a zine, but it's my work and I can sell it however I want later. So like knowing those kind of things is cool, and finding the people who support that.
Tappy wanted to say something.
I totally forgot what it is.
Okay.
I have no clue.
Sorry, Tappy.
It's all right.
You know, that's an interesting thing that Tone, you just brought up is another, and I hadn't even thought about this, and it's great, like another avenue to help bring these things out, right, are the very successful streamers, right, that have a lot of eyeballs, right? And if all they're doing is saying like, oh, hey, we're going to play the top 2 or 3 game systems that are available at all, right? And that's all you ever see. Well, that's all anybody who's coming in to the tabletop RPG hobby sees, right? But if you've got, and I'll just call them out because we know them and they're huge. If Matt Mercer is like, hey, here's this cool indie game and we're going to play this, and I apologize to Matt after doing this, you know, like that's a ton of visibility.
Oh, yeah.
for
you know, for the hobby, and that's interesting. And
to some
something that
extent,
we could
you've
do.
seen them do a little bit of that, just like you guys have done. The main thing is like play the game you love, right? Because if you're just playing to do the thing, it's going to show, and people aren't going to be that into it, right? And that's what I love about watching you guys is you're playing what you love, like you can hear it, right?
All right. Do you want to go on to his question, Tomes?
Oh my God, we're only halfway through this letter. This is like COVID all over again.
Whoa! Wow.
By
right.
the way,
That's
as
more
insulting
hyperbole
as
than
that
I
sounds, Andreas, I love you. I am like you. I have been here forever watching Happy Jack's shows. Andreas goes back with me as a listener, so I'm in love. Honored that I can read the rest of a question. I found that many gamers, myself included, often gravitate towards certain kind of characters. Among the hosts, Storic has, for example, expressed his inclination to create rangers when playing D&D. I'm pretty sure most of us can recognize those habits. I try to challenge myself when playing games with lots of randomization. Roll them bones and play what you get. But what do you do when the game is a point buy, or maybe a playbook or similar archetype-based system? How do you challenge yourself to play something new and develop as a gamer? Create a character and then pass it to the player on the left and play what you get? Ooh, that's a fascinating idea. Pick a tarot card, Decuma card maybe, and make a character out of that. Have any of you tried something like that? How did it go down? Naturally, this is not for everyone, but if you have felt you're stuck in a rut, what do you do? Any ideas? But first, drink. Cheers,
Sorry,
Andreas, in SE, Sweden. Oh my God. I'm honored to have read your letter, by the way. Thank you.
A lot of love, Tomes. You know, like that's actual sincere love right there.
Me and Andreas go way back, dude. Like seriously, like 8 years or some shit. How long has he been writing to you guys?
Long time. I can tell you. You guys start addressing this, and I'll let you know exactly.
One thing I kind of want to say is, while I think it's a good idea if you're interested in kind of like pushing yourself and doing different characters as if you were an actor, this is also fun. And if you, like was said at the end, like it's not for everybody, don't feel pressure to do this kind of thing. Because what really sucks to get into a campaign with a character you don't really like.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if there's types of characters you like and types of characters you don't, like, I like my characters to be just fucking weirdos and whatever they're going to be. And if I ended up with a character who is, like, a basic paladin, I would have to fuck with that somehow. Because if I didn't, I just wouldn't have any fun.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? I mean, one of the things I've found that I do when I write characters or come with the ideas for them is that I'm always playing against type, right? So it's really hard for me to say, "Oh, I'm going to play like an orc barbarian or an orc warrior, whatever it is." Like it's always got to be some strings like, "Oh, he's an orc, but he's a paladin who's an alcoholic," right? It's going to be like some like strange thing. Right now, I'm playing with Elspeth and I are playing with Adam and Joey, and the Potts duo in a Star Trek Adventures game, and the character I mean is like, well, I'm going to make security chief, right? So I go a completely different direction where all of my stuff is more about investigation, like my physical stats, which normally are the ones that if you're going to like fight somebody or use a phaser, right? You're using security plus, I think it's fitness or whatever it is. That's my lowest stat. It's the physical one because all my stuff is like perception and intellect, everything. So my character's like, oh, I'm running the investigations on the ship, right? I'm more of a, and then there's like many levels to the onion because I'm playing an Andorian who's a part of the Amtal, which is basically their Black Ops spy society. And I'm also a member of Section 31, which is the Starfleet intelligence Black Ops. And I'm playing the two against the middle, right? So it's like, I can't just play, the security chief who's like the big Klingon. I doesn't do that because it's like, I'm going to play against type. So I get you. I feel you. Like if you did the thing, you order up characters and then pass them to the right, like I'd be super bummed if I got, oh, okay.
I'm playing Worf.
Yeah.
I guess I'm playing Worf.
Okay, so check this out. There's some games that flirt with something in the middle of this, and some of you guys have played this. Who's played 10 Candles?
Oh yeah, that's right. It does
right?
that. It does that. Yeah.
Yeah, you're creating your character, and you get to do your name and stuff, but then the virtue gets passed to the left, and the vice gets passed to the right. So you're like advantages and disadds are kind of like distributed in weird ways. And then you get to do this kind of final thing. So it kind of plays with, okay, I have some character agency. Now I don't. And then I get to wrap it up with some more character agency. And, like they're very light characters anyways. But that way, and especially if like the disad somebody gives you just says like conceited, like you could play that any way you want, right? So like a lot of these, like it's a game that kind of plays with a little bit of this concept, but without going all the way, right? Where I'm just making your own character, right?
See, now here is where I'm like, I don't really think 10 Candles is an RPG. I think it's a party game that has role-playing elements in it.
Well, this is the great thing about you and me discussing this is I actually don't ever talk about what consists in RPG because I have good, strong opinions about that. So
fair enough.
You're good.
But I mean, that's when it's difficult because it's like, oh, well, this happens in here. How do you take that and bring it to a regular, more kind of traditional or even like Apocalypse World role-playing game?
I mean, look, even the word games, sometimes people are going to have some pretty good philosophical arguments about that one. But I also tend to avoid those too.
Fair enough.
I mean, it's really interesting. I've one of the things that I think it's Mook that was the first person I saw do this, and he was bringing what I think of now as maybe more indie game mentalities to GURPS. Right, which is we've been making our character, we're talking about them, and then he just asks you a question like, what was it that Tappy's character found out about you that sent you to prison? And then you're like, oh man, right? So I'm still making the choice, but he's putting a relationship flavor for me to be considered there, right? So like I'm being presented with something, I still have agency in it, but it's not where I would maybe naturally have gone with the character, right? And that's pretty interesting.
Very.
Yeah.
Mook is a GM genius, right?
Yeah.
Like I've played in a couple of his games, and they're always fantastic. And you can play at different levels. So if you want to come in and you want to play GURPS, and you want to be like, I need my graphing calculator because I'm going to bust this shit out, you can play that game, and he's going to give you that game. But also, like, you can play, like, without knowing anything. Like, if you're me and you want to be a hippie and not know any rules, like, I can come in and just play that game and have a blast.
Just so you know, on Andreas's first email was on season 6, episode 18, from December 17th, 2011.
Wow.
11, dude.
So that's almost 9 years. And it was about armor class. I have the email here.
It was so good until you said that.
Was that the soak against versus like minuses debate?
It's a can. It has worms in it. Let's leave it closed.
I just want to know if it's about that.
I heard someone, Stu, wanted to saint the guy who invented the idea of armor as damage reduction. I know who it is, and you just have to travel to Arizona to meet him. Ken St. Andre. That would have been, Tunnels and Trolls, probably. So
this is interesting, right? Because that goes back to the thing where you're like, oh, I don't know who that did that, but they should be sainted, right? He's like, I happen to know. And because it's making me think about the last conversation we had. Entertainment specifically, unless it's like television or movies, is horrible about you knowing who made anything.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like, it is very rare that someone who plays video games can tell you who the designers were on the product, or tabletop games can tell you who the designers were in the product, right? It's like music. Yep, I know who's in the band. I know musicians. Sometimes though, people only know the band. They might not know the individuals, but at least they know the band. Right. And I think there's two things that contribute to that. One, in films and television and music, right, the people that are doing it are in front of you, so you see them.
Right. And
you're like, oh yeah, I'm making a connection with that person. Two,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
And the other one is that games specifically are all about giving the player the power. So I'm not presenting to you as much as I'm creating an interactive experience or giving you the tools to go create your own interactive experience. So it's not about me and my presentation and my performance and my words and story, right? Like, people know who J.K. Rowling is because they've read her work, but that is her presenting you something. Like, the work as a designer that I'm doing is getting something in front of you that then you make yours and you enjoy in your way. So almost by design, we pull ourselves out of the recognition process.
And it's like songwriting. I mean, how many of our songs end up getting posted on the web somewhere with the saying that they're traditional? Because we write a lot of songs for Renaissance Fair.
I heard at it was on not Spotify, the shitty one.
Apple Music?
No. Pandora. Somebody did exactly a copy of Finnegan's Wake from the Boggarts with the exact same callbacks.
Oh, really?
Like, you know what? Word for word.
I might know who that is. God, I got to think about it. I can't remember right now.
Was it a tribute?
Yeah, that's what it was. A tribute.
It might have been. Who knows? It might have been. And the other thing is, I get emails from people who are like, "Can we record this song?" And it's like, "Yeah, go ahead." But if you guys get famous with it and make a ton of money, then we're going to talk. But yeah, I don't care. And then 2 years later, someone says, "Hey, someone recorded your song." I'm like, "Yeah, I probably told them they could."
Somebody should make money off that stuff,
right?
Can I add one more thing to this question, this Andreas question?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, the next question. It's this thing about the character passing. A game to try is called The Final Girl. And this isn't the only game that does it, but it's been around for a while. So you know the concept, the movie concept?
Yes.
Right? Like horror movies, the final girl is the last person who survives the horror encounter, right? Nightmare on Elm Street, whatever. And then maybe they survive or maybe they didn't, because like Nightmare on Elm Street. And so this is a game that lets you do that. And what you do is, let's say the four of us were playing, we each create 3 characters, right? And this becomes a character pool. And as we're playing the game, we're taking turns setting scenes and killing people off. So that means that each of us plays different characters at different times. On a scene, I'll set the scene like, oh, this is in the cabin and we can see the shadow back here and da-da-da-da-da. Okay, Bill, you choose a character. And now you look at your pool and you choose whoever you want to play in that scene. And we all do that. And so what's happening is we all get to play different characters that we've all collaboratively created. Each of us have created like 3 of these guys, right? But I can play anybody. I can play Bill's character. I can play Stu's, whatever, right? And as you're going on and people are starting to get murdered because mechanics, and then the people who stay get more points to more easily stay later because investment in the story. And so if you're getting this movie going on where you don't know who the main characters are in the beginning, like you never do when you watch a movie, right? And there's like a bunch of people, and now at the end you find out the final girl, right? The last person who survived. It's fantastic. So like, this is a game you can use to see if you can enjoy that process of having someone else create a character for you. It's almost like training for that. And if you don't enjoy that game, you know, maybe that's not for you. Even if you do enjoy that game, you might want to make your own character in D&D or whatever, right? But like, it's a way to flirt with that in a different kind of game mechanic.
That's super interesting to me. Like, one of the things that Star Trek Adventures does that's really interesting, and I'll play our intro in the background while I talk, is the idea that you have your main characters that you make, right? And those are the ones that you put the most points into and everything. But then there's a whole mechanics system that's set up to be able to have like all these basically like other crew members when you need them. Because let's say I make the ship's doctor. Well, if there's an away mission, I'm probably not going to, I might not send a doctor on the away mission. It may not be the right thing to do, right?
Or, oh my God, you could play a whole company of red shirts is what you're telling me.
You can, yeah. So basically you can like very quickly, they have a super fast mechanic to like just make another character that's appropriate. You can name stuff and you take them down. And the thing that's really interesting is it allows you to, like, as your kind of main character, do what you really, really want to do, but you're never caught short. The game master's never caught short of saying like, oh man, I gotta make a scenario that makes sense for everybody to go on, right? Or, oh, we can't do this one. I set this big thing up to go down and this player didn't show up. And
that
now we don't
super
have
clever game design.
A security player. You're just like, oh, great, I'm going to make a security officer. Okay, boom, here they go, right? And the thing that's cool is they also have a mechanic is if that character starts becoming more than a secondary character because people like them and play them a lot.
Like Chief O'Brien?
Yeah, like Chief O'Brien. Then you start having ways you can start applying more skills to them and more virtues and more like all these different things, right? So it's one of the things I really like about their system is, and we've had that happen, and we've had some characters now. Katie plays the doctor, but she made this like ensign engineer who's amazing and is totally in love with the chief engineer. Right. And now we're kind of all clamoring, waiting for like, oh, I can't wait for there's a mission where I can't go on, but they need another engineer because I can't wait to play that character. It's the same idea, right? Anybody can play these characters get made. I love that as a mechanic. It's super smart. And yeah, it lets you, and it like gives you the opportunity as well of saying like, oh, you know, what'd be really interesting is let's just do a B team mission with all these other like, you know, secondary characters you've introduced and let's go play that.
That's really clever game design. That's really clever game design.
I think I think they figured it out, but the chat room was losing their shit because they saw the credits for Adam West being in a Star Trek episode.
Yeah, Adam's our GM, right? We basically were like, hey, let's all play, right? Let's do Star Trek Adventures, and it's Adam and Joey and Elspeth and me and Katie and Kurt Potts, and I wanted to learn Adobe Premiere. Mm-hmm. Right, because I wanted to do some video editing, and so I just took it on myself like, oh, well, I'm just going to make an intro sequence for it, like it was an actual Star Trek thing. So Star Trek Endeavor is our show, and it was cool. It was like it's like, oh, I want to. This is a thing that I wonder. I'm going to ask if you all do this too. I find myself like I want to do something, make a prop for a game, or put something up, or do, you know, put up a website or whatever it is, and I don't know how to do it, so I have to teach myself how to do it to then achieve the thing I want for the game, which is like what this is.
Oh yeah.
And I'm interested if you guys do that too.
I've done that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I used to make a lot of games out of Lego, So that's where I started to do that. Like that was my original direction. Like you guys put me onto Savage Worlds, and I was like, oh wow, okay, this is how I can run my D&D or Star Frontiers game or whatever. And so I did that for a couple of years with a bunch of Lego props that I'm still very proud of. I still have them. I could run this for you now if I needed to. And then I made a Fallout Shelter game with Lego. So I get it. I totally
That
get like
was
the creating.
brilliant, dude. The Fallout Shelter game was brilliant.
Dude, the people who do like paint and like all the terrain shit, I get that shit. There's like a super desire to have this like beautiful, presentation. And for me, Lego that was my way of doing it, my way. But like, I totally get it. I think for me recently, part of my problem, and I'll say this is a problem as a hippie gamer, is that you get into this like very like some of the rules are so light and stuff, like it kind of eliminates sometimes the need to have the props, because a lot of it becomes like in the mind eye, we're just doing story bullshit, right? Like that kind of thing. And that can be, like, yeah, you use index cards, sure, it's all cinematic, but I miss a little bit of that tactile nature. And so one of the things that I did more recently is like, I'll find these indie games, but mix it with like a setting like that Southeast Asian one. And then my props instead are like, oh, well, they did the art. Their prop is the art because that is gorgeous and you need to see it playing this game. So it's not me creating like a set piece. It's kind of like, I'm going to use the designers or the artist set piece in the game because that's so important. And like people do similar things, right? Where they get artists and, grab their art, in little albums or whatever to inspire them for the cinema of the game, right? But yeah, I get it. Making things.
I taught myself Python so I could do Traveler trade codes without having to actually use their charts. Which was ridiculously overkill.
Yeah, I think Tappy inadvertently did this because I will say one of the things I enjoyed the most about the Fallout campaign was the fact that your engineer, like, because you knew all that stuff, like, your engineer was so freaking believable. Dude, that was intense.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And like, I don't know. It's interesting when you have real world experience of something. I think it also changes your ability to be like super creative because you know what your limitations are. That's one of the things that I like about Star Trek, is that you're like fucking. You're basically humans are basically space wizards with technology. You can do fucking anything with technobabble. Whereas when you're in like the near future post-apocalypse, like, oh yeah, no, I know exactly what you need to do to get plants growing and shit like that.
And if you don't do these things, we're all going to die.
And if you don't do these things, we're going to die.
All right. Any last things before we move on to the next one? No? Going?
Last thing I'll say is that I liked the idea of this have a little element and either add it or have it be part of the basis for the character, right? Like the in the email type about like a tarot card or a Decima card or something like that, right? Like giving something, and it's interesting to Tone's part, like if that was actually a physical prop, right? If that was a thing, like I would be cool if you went to a game and said like, hey, you need to bring a physical prop with you that you're going to hand to someone else who's going to be a part of their character.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like I'm not telling them what to do, but man, I'm giving them like, here's an interesting seed for you to plant. Right? Would be super cool.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds great.
Very cool.
And another thing I really like is I bet you could put a pool of NPC characters that are playable by PCs into any game. Like there's really no reason you can't. Yeah. You can probably put together like a super quick thing like they have in Star Trek, but that's not. The 2D20 system isn't like set up just to do that. Like you could do that in Traveler, no problem.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You could do that in, you could even do that in like D&D. Just do quick picks of certain things and you're ready to roll. But yeah, I really like that idea of just, when the time comes, or if you need a different character for whatever reason, just switch to another one you've made.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Andreas in Sweden. GMing.
Oh, sorry, Andreas. Again, I love you.
GMing at cons from Joe Crack. Who would like to read that one?
I'll read it.
Okay.
GMing at cons from Joe Crack. There we go. On a recent episode, I shockingly found myself agreeing with Stu for once. A GM is not simply there to entertain other players. A GM is part of the game. Or is the game a part of the GM? At our local conventions, our local organizers have told the GMs that your fun is just as important as the players. So if you have a problem player, you have the right to remove them from the game. If facilitating a game like Fiasco, then likely the facilitator also wants to play. So they have every right dictating how many players they want to have at the table.
Is this some sort of callback, by the way?
It is. Let me explain it.
No, I know. But go ahead.
Someone was at a con, and the guy was, I think he was running Fiasco, and he had brought in, he wanted to limit it to 4 or 5 players, and this table was full, and people were showing up asking if there was room in the game, and he was literally ignoring them and not acknowledging that they were asking him a question. The guy had other problems as well, but that was the impetus for the thing. And what he's probably talking about is the fact that I like to have a smaller table, rather play with 4 players rather than 6, because I think you're going to give the players a better game, and also if the players are getting a better game, I feel better about the game myself. You know what I mean? And the larger it is, it just ends up becoming more work and less fun for the GM.
You were a trailblazer at our con for that.
I know,
right? Because everybody was 6. It was 6, 6, 6. You got to have 6, and part of it was the requirements that you had to have so many people at your table and run so many games total to get a free pass.
Hours or something.
Yeah,
right.
Player hours, right? And I remember you said like, "Oh, yeah, I'm not doing that anymore. Like 4 people is the most I'm going to run.
Yeah,
it's a better game, right?" And then now that's like now everybody's doing that. You were a trendsetter.
You were a trendsetter. I followed that trend. I'm serious. Like when I first came to the con, it was because I had listened to your podcast and I showed up at your games. Like I played in a Cthulhu game, and there was like 7 players, and it was still fucking fabulous. Like we all had such a blast. And so I thought that was just the way it had to be. It was 6 players, and of course the rules around the con. And so that's what I did for a while. And then the first time, like only 3 or 2 people show up, or 3 people show up after you've had full tables, and you're like, huh, this is a lot easier and a lot more fun.
Oh yeah.
And so
everybody gets more screen time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did the same. I dropped to 4, and you had to run 3 games instead of 2, but it was like, I was running 3 anyways, whatever.
Oh, I also take they count the live show on Saturday nights as one of my events.
It has.
So I can get away with
I should start a podcast.
Yeah. I really like 5 because if 1 drops out, you still got 4, and that's a good game. 3, I think, is a little light.
Yeah,
3 is light, but after playing so many hippie games, I've played so many 2 and 3 player games that have been so satisfying that when I get a table of 2 or 3, like I'm still nervous because I come from like feeling like that's not enough dynamic. It kind of puts more pressure on you too, right? Like you got to come up with more shit or what? But like I found that, you know, if you give them a lot of the like story authority, if you play like a hippie game, it's like I'm not as responsible for making some shit that makes sense. Like we're all doing it, less pressure. And then you know, like just having 3 people or 2 people, sometimes it's just like you get to let everybody come up with more shit. It's not for everybody though. Like I've also had like completely horrible games that way. But
yeah, when I think back when Bill and I were in college, when we met, I ran a GURPS game, and I think from the vast majority of that, we had 4 players. I seem to recall it was you, Brian, Stevie, and Fred.
Yep.
And that was that was our the total group. I mean, other people would come and go, but we played with a core group of 4 for years.
Yeah, it was the thing that was really cool about that was that when everybody got more spotlight, but when something happened, it oddly enough, it felt like it meant more right? When Stevie's character got possessed or whatever happened to him,
Right.
and he decided, and he was the mage, right? And we were fairly high points at that point. When he decided he was going to turn on the party, it was like, oh, this just got real bad real fast. And it wasn't like there was 8 of us that could stand against him.
Right.
There was 3 of us, right? And so suddenly those stakes were a lot higher, and that made for a lot more interesting story.
And Stevie was really good about making mages in Europe.
And using
Very
points.
effective.
Oh, yes.
yeah.
Oh, is that the one where it's like the levitate spell or whatever? Where I levitate them 1,000 feet and then drop them?
Apportation, I think, was the name of the
Yeah.
spell. But yeah, I think either he or Eric Aldrich came up with that tactic. I don't remember which one of them
Right.
it was.
Like, how high is it till terminal velocity? That's how high I apportate them. Okay, I turn the spell off.
I mean, spells, magic is cool, but magic plus physics?
Right. Well, it was
That
actually,
was-
if I recall, it was worse than that because it caused the character you're casting it on to move at a rate of like 1 or 2 meters a second for a minute, and you could send them, and it wasn't a spell you had to concentrate on. You could literally just cast it on the person and then forget about it and go do whatever you want, and they're just going to drop 120 yards. At some point in the future, probably long after the combat's over.
Yeah, but that's literally how you win D&D, right?
Right.
And if he bounces, you do it again.
Well, and the thing that's interesting, too, is at the end of that, like, his character started to go crazy.
Yeah.
And was obviously a threat. And so we all were like, the rest of the 3 of us were like, oh, no, it's all good. We were like, everything's great. And we got him to a point where I was on one side of him, and Brian was on the other side of him, and we were going to enter some, I don't know, a temple, or I don't know what we're going to do. And basically, Brian looks at me, he's like, hey, left nut. I'm like, hey, right nut. He goes, who's the penis between us? And we both just stabbed him. Like, and that was the table talk. That was it. Because we were super mature.
I remember that.
Sometimes the story of saving the world sounds like that.
Yeah, that was our story of saving the world.
All right.
Yeah.
Back to Joe Crack's email. Because I think did we finish reading
I have
it?
a thing to say about it,
Okay.
if that's cool. Like, I get it, like, you're at a con, responsibility as a GM to showcase the game and blah, 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 but you're also there because you want to have a fucking good time. And sometimes that's running a big game, sometimes it's running a smaller game and making those decisions. This guy from the original letter definitely could use some, like, communication practice. Sure. But at the same time, like, I think he knew what he wanted, obviously. And so, like, knowing what you want and being able to communicate about that is great.
Yeah.
So that's a great premise. However, if you do want to try smaller games, dude, you can go smaller. Let's take it down. 3-player games, 2-player games. There's 1-player games. There's even a 0-player game. I'm not fucking shitting you.
That's
Not
masturbation.
really, I mean,
Well, yeah, they're
Okay, wait.
choose your own adventures, right?
A 0-player game, is that assuming there is, or is it counting the GM as a player or not?
no, it counts as the GM as a player. So the 0-player game actually has nobody playing it. So okay, is that a game? I know me and Tappy will have some good words about it. It's definitely a poem. It's a poem. Okay, let's. But okay,
How do you
seriously,
have a
like,
0-player game? I mean,
Not even the GM is playing. There's nobody there. It's just a rock. Like, it's just there. How does the kid?
Go check out PH Lee, 4 Ways to Die in the Future. It's 4 mini games, and one of them is a 0-player game. PH Lee.
What is it called again?
Theme Quest.
Are you?
Sorry, Steve?
Are you sure it isn't just a GM and then no players? There's no GM.
I will not be.
And no
I will
players.
not be taking questions. You have to go do your research.
All right, I'll look that up. 4 Ways to Die in the Forest. Is that what it was called?
In the future.
In the future.
4 Ways to Die in the Future.
In the future first.
I ran one of the games for our indie RPG meetup. Like the only
But
one.
nobody showed up. But it was fine. It was a 0-player game.
Even
so who
Tomes,
cares?
apparently.
Now you know my trick. It was the only game of the 4 where I was like, oh yeah, this is a real game I can play at a table. I mean, the other ones are cool too. Like, you can play them, I guess. But, but fantastic. It's a work of art. But I do want to talk about smaller tables. Like, there's 2-player games out there and 3-player games, and those games can be fantastic. And so sometimes you want to go to a con and run a game, and you want it to, it has a limitation. Downfall only takes 3 players, right? Starcrossed is a 2-player game. It's a 2-player game about love that should not be, right? With a Jenga tower. Like, those games are specifically made for very small parties. And so it's okay to do that. Just learn how to communicate and we'll all be good.
All right. Anything else on that? Moving on. Pre-written adventures from Jonas Larson. The Scandinavians are represented.
Me. That's me. Let me turn my mic on for real and not use spacebar, because I just tried to do that and was like, I'm putting a lot of spaces in the Google Doc. Okay. GMing at cons from Joe Crack. Pre-written adventures from Jonas Larson. Greetings from your longtime fan, Jonas Larson, a.k.a. the unforgettable understudy of Uncommon Man. The topic of today's electronic mail is pre-written adventures. I have always been the one in my group that loved to GM instead of being forced to do it. It's fantastic to make your own stuff and see what inquisitive drama will spring forth when it comes in contact with your players. But I have also always loved to run pre-written modules. But on your podcast, the general consensus seems to be different. You have said things like that pre-written modules are only something that you use in a pinch, and it's actually more work to run one instead of making one yourself like a real auteur. I've never been able to understand that. It's like a musician saying that she only composes her own music and never played anyone else's songs. So about a year back, I got a gig as a content editor for an RPG company, and now I have RPG writing as part of my livelihood. That has got me to thinking more professionally about what makes a good written adventure, and I would love to hear your opinions on the matter. So my questions are, multi-part questions. Why do you prefer to write your own stuff over pre-written modules? If that's actually the case, and I'm not just jumping to nasty conclusions. Should we do these one at a time?
Yeah,
or should I read all 3?
Read all 3 and then we'll address them.
Second question, what kind of pre-written adventures are interesting to you? What do you like to see in them? And the third is, do you have any pre-written adventures or campaigns that you've run and liked? You are my RPG role models, and I'm really looking forward to your answers. With regards, Jonas Larson.
Oh, by the way, Jonas Larson's first email was in Season 9, Episode 17.
Wow.
Well, me and Jonas also go way back.
Right,
Maybe a one-sided relationship. I do want to say that I was a huge part of the forum for a long time. I'm not talking about the current forum. I'm talking about the forum.
Right, yeah.
Real
Yeah.
The Wild West.
Like, Jib was always at the top there statistic-wise because Jib, but I was in the top 10 at one point.
And
Vince that Jim wrote a bot to write all those posts back then.
All right, why do you prefer to write your own adventure over pre-written modules, if that's the actual case, and I'm not just jumping to nasty conclusions? First off, do you all agree with that statement? I certainly do. I don't know. How does it...
I do not care for pre-written modules.
I also do not care for pre-written modules.
I disagree.
Good, that's why you're on the show.
Yeah.
That's right.
Tappy ban him.
No, I'm in charge of this one.
So what now? What reasons do you have for not preferring them or preferring them?
For me, like, if I'm going to do that amount of work anyway,
He just froze.
my players have so much agency, if you know what I mean. Like in my last game, one of my players destroyed the underworld, and then the rest of the game was about how she destroyed the underworld.
Right.
And so, like, player character, like, actions have consequences, not necessarily bad ones. Like, in the game, Traveler game that Bill and I were in, or that Bill is in, of mine, where Bill's like, hey, this culture sucks. They do something terrible. We should end that. And everybody's like, yeah! I'm like, well, I guess that's what this game's about then. And with a predefined adventure, I don't have that ability. I have to, like, steer him back or tell him why he can't. And the moment the entire game is in the player's hand and they're doing what they want and they are active instead of reactive, that's when I love the game. When I am reacting to them, not they are reacting to me.
Right.
And pre-written modules are set up so that this is a thing and the players have to react to it. And that's just not my jam.
Someone else?
Is it my turn?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you want to be your turn, or do you want us all to
Bring it.
pile on first? What do you want? Go, bring it to.
All right. So yes and no, right? Like there's like I came from a background like I'm old, like not quite as old as some of us, but I am pretty up there.
Hey.
74, right? I'm wearing like this is the expert set I had, right? Like I was back there, right?
You're 74 years old?
That's what I got that too. I was like, wow, you look amazing.
Wow.
It's my
What
regiment.
spot do you go to?
So, back then modules were modules, right? You had a game system and then you had a module, which is like the pre-written thing that you kind of went through. And it obviously had kind of like a goal and stuff. But like as time's gone on, sometimes that's shifted a little bit. And like, so some of the stuff I'll see in some of the indie space is like, there'll be like these kind of pseudo settings that you can kind of use for any system, and it kind of telling you what's happening, but maybe not necessarily, or maybe it's using mechanics to kind of like automatically generate some of what's happening, in a weird way. So you get a story and it's definitely around a certain kind of topic, but it's not really telling you how to approach it, or even like all the rooms or any of that kind of shit. Like that's not structured at all. So like there's this kind of middle ground where you have these settings and like modules in a sense, but they're not connected to the mechanics. So you could run it in any game system you want, right? So if you're into D&D, awesome, do it as a D&D game and you can figure that shit out. Or if you're into Fiasco, cool, you can do this as a Fiasco scenario because it's just about shit going bad, right? Even though it's in like a weird fantasy world. And so, like I think that's an interesting space where you kind of like, there's some like pseudo settings and then pseudo game systems and like kind of mixing and playing with those. So like that Southeast Asian fantasy thing I was talking about, the first book of that is this world called Merkur, and I just took that and kind of like it looked like Fall of Magic in a way, and so I made it play like kind of like a Fall of Magic game, but I didn't play it like those guys wrote it because they play D&D, like that's what they know, and they know some other games as well, but like that was where they came from, and that's why the guy wrote the thing. But when I read it, it didn't have any stats and shit in it. It was just like poetry about this weird place. So like I didn't have to run it in any game system that was mechanical. I could run it in a story game, right? And there's the second book that came out is this other world, and I'm running it in Everyone's a Suspect, which is a murder mystery game, because it's all about spies and cats and shit. So it was like, oh, this might be a good game to run this thing in. So you kind of like mash the two together. And to me, that's a really interesting, like kind of fun thing to do, right? Because like I'm also like, if I think of traditional RPGs and like crunchy systems, like running a module, like that's not fun for me unless I get to do whatever the fuck I want, like Happy was saying, right? Like I'll use it as a basis and then I'll kind of do what I want with it, right? Anyways, that's my ramble.
The thing I don't tend to like about modules, and maybe I would feel differently if I was trying to run them again, because that's kind of how we all ran everything when we were starting. That's all there was, and I, whatever, I was 14, I had no concept of like I'm going to write a whole thing. Then is from a player experience, and to kind of walk the walk, just talk the talk, because I think we've spent a lot of time, at least in years previously on the show, kind of like talking about like Adventurers Guild or like all these prefab things. And so at one con I signed up and I went and did it, right? I went and did it and did the Adventurers Guild and ran through it, and all it was being told no. Like I want to do this thing. Yeah, that's not covered in the module. You can't do that, right? And then I made up a character and I brought it in, and it's all according to the rules, and people are like, oh, you really should take this instead, because you'll have. They're just like there was no like, hey, cool character concept. We're like, oh, interesting way to solve the problem. It was like, no, that's not how it goes. No, and I think that the challenge with that is, especially in structured play like that, where part of their mission is to say, hey, you're going to earn points and your character's going to be, and you can take that anywhere, right? And your character's okay, is they get in this mindset of like, well, I can't alter the rules. I can't change it, because everybody has to go through it in the same way, in the same fashion. But boy, is that a downside for players. and for the GMs too.
Okay.
Right. So I think that's, I've had enough bad experiences being on the receiving end of modules where, you know, I'm just kind of not excited by them. I'd rather either as a GM or with a good GM, when something comes up like, oh, Rails, what are Rails? Forget that. Let's go whatever direction it is, because now the story is super interesting.
Right. Yeah, I think I agree with both of you about that, the sort of constraint you feel, or a constraint that exists with pre-written modules. The other thing for me is my eyes start glazing over as I start reading through them, because it's not like you can just pick it up and run the game without having pre-read the thing. And very often, even back in the 70s, when I'd go pick up modules from the hobby shop and look through them back with first edition D&D, it's like, I don't know why I bought this. The text.
It's homework.
Right, exactly. It is, and you know, and it's written in Gygaxian back then, which is tough. And I just now one of the things that you mentioned, and I think because his second question, what kind of pre-written adventures are interesting to you? And when you bring up things like settings, or like collections of NPCs, or collections of things that you can steal from and put in your game, that kind of stuff I love. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, one of my favorite things, and it's interesting. It's less of a pre-written adventure, but the odd jobs table in, I think it's the Mercenaries Splat book for Traveler, right? Is it's basically like, oh, hey, you're at a starport and you're like, oh, I don't have any big gigs. And I'm like, you can roll on a random table, and all they are is basically adventure scenes.
Right.
They give you, here's an NPC you meet, here's a scenario that happens, right? And it's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna run with that, right? And I think like that was less of a here's a whole structured thing, but it's more like here's something to get you going. Like I love that kind of stuff. Like or even you like the one sheet adventures, right? Like that's to me interesting pre-written adventure material.
Exactly.
100% agree with that.
Yeah. There's also for Traveler they have the 1001 characters book.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Elspeth and I are doing a group characters book we're working on, where basically they're groups of 6 characters, and we're actually using the system to roll them up, and so they all have connections. So when you get them, it'd be like, oh, here's a bunch of people that just graduated from military academy, right? Mm-hmm. And the idea is that if you're a GM, right, you might be like, oh, hey, let's do a one shot. Here you go, boom. Here's some number of characters that all have a reason to play together.
Oh my God, right? How awesome that would be for con games.
Yeah, that's the whole idea. Is that, or if players were like, oh, hey, not everybody showed up. It'd be cool to do a side mission. Boom, here's some characters. So when we do the book, it's going to be here's the characters, here's where they're located. They all have a location, or where they are all together. Like one of them is like all people that work at a starport, right? And you could use them to then go do adventures with.
So not just that. What if you imagine that book of 1001 characters or whatever, and those characters, like if you read all the stories, like you'd find out there's actually there's a undercurrent of stories in there, right? Where suddenly you start reading into like, oh wait, there's weird revolution shit going on. Oh, by the way, there's like this union over here, and these guys aren't into the union, and do you know what I mean? Like and it's not part of the game. It's just like written into these characters. And if you just picked one, you can make up whatever you want with it. But if you read the whole thing, there's like narratives going on. And to me, that's one of the reasons why I liked Merkurger and all those Thousand Islands. Each one is like a setting. But if you read the whole setting, you're not given a A to B line adventure path. But what you see is there's an undercurrent of stuff going on. Cultural, sometimes there's like people who know each other, but like it's kind of hinted at. And to me, that's the most fantastic thing, because I can just pull stuff out of that game, like settings, and just run with it and make up my own shit. Or if I use enough of them, then I can like play with the stories that those guys provided, right? And kind of like dig into that. Either it's just like inspiration for how to play a character, or like maybe what the big bad is, or whatever is, causing tension between my players. Like all that stuff is part of the setting.
Well, it's interesting because it's less that it's an adventure, right? Like here's a little thing, and it's more like seeds or like accessories, right? Like, here's a thing you can use. Like, oh man, I still have my copies of Grimtooth's traps,
Oh, yeah.
which
Oh,
were
yeah.
just like crazy, right? And or like or that's like you get a book and say, oh, here's like 1,000 items, and it's just like things you look through and you can and inspire things, or even just like, you know, you might find some super cool sword that's in a book and you're like, that gives me an idea for an adventure. Like, I love tools more than I want someone to have to write the whole thing out for me, right? But those can be pretty robust tools. Like, those can be complete characters, can be complete groups. That could be I love the books that are like, here's 100 establishments for your city, right? Because there's times where you're like, they go into a pub. Oh man, I don't want to try to think of a pub. Boink, here it is.
Or even like, you know, like take a D&D module, like one that I read at one point, and I was like, no, I have no desire to run this. But it's like that basic, like, dragon ascending, has minions going into a town and fucking with it, and then you have to like go and destroy the dragon. Instead, having a thing where there'd be like 6 or 7 dragons around, and all the shit they're doing to fuck with each other, and you have all these story seeds and possibilities within that. Yeah, maybe like somebody destroys a town, or maybe like one of the dragons is like doing some magic bullshit, or another dragon needs something done. As long as there are things that have to be done, that the players want to do, especially if a game can give things for the players that the players find themselves in an untenable situation and want to figure out how to do it their own way. That's what I really, really want in a module. So if there's an untenable situation where there's 6 dragons trying to murder each other and the characters have to figure out how to stop that, go. That's much more interesting to me.
You know, that reminds me of very early on, a game designer named James Raggy sent us 4 or 5 self-published adventures, and they were systemless adventures. And I think that he originally wrote them for Lamentation of the Flame Princess. I can't remember the game.
Oh, that's the one that had the OG, the
yeah, I think
the OS.
It may have started as an OSR game,
open source,
I think. But the thing about the adventure, because I think we divided them up. I think he sent us 3 or 4 of them. I read one, I think Tappy read one, and Stork read one. And I read through this adventure, and it's like, okay, this is how I come up with adventures. It's like, okay, the one I had, it was like a wedding, and there was a murder mystery, and like the bride was found dead or something. And then he goes through and says, here's the areas where this takes place. It takes place on an estate or something like that. And here's the different locations. Here's the NPCs that are involved, and also the suspects, and what their relationships were with the victim or with the groom or whoever. And then, you know, when you get to the back of it, it's like, and this was the part to me that made me laugh, because I do this all the time whenever I'm doing a mystery like that. He doesn't tell you who the murderer is. You figure out who the murderer is, or the party figures out who the murderer is, and
players figure out who it is. That's right. The brilliant part.
And I think if I were, and I never ran it. I haven't run a pre-made module in probably 3 or 4 decades. But if I were to run a module, it would almost have to be something like that. That's very open-ended, where it's basically, I'm going to frame a scene or frame a series of scenes. Go, do what you're going to do.
Excuse me. Like, when I joined this podcast and I started following you fuckers, and you guys came out with 2 sides, 1 epic.
Right.
That's exactly what that was.
Yeah.
It was just like, here is a shit ton of scenarios, you know, a 1 or 2-sided page, and it's going to give you all the basic shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually ran a Dungeon World campaign where we were like a crack team of army recruits out on the edge protecting the Empire from incursion, right? But I couldn't get players to get at the table consistently. So I made it very episodic, and I used all those 2 sides, 1 epic things as like the individual missions they had to go on.
Oh, cool.
So whoever showed up on that Tuesday, it was like, okay, I'm going to run this, but I'm going to kind of like tweak it so it works in our world, like our fantasy world, and then done. And that's what I did. I ran like 5 of those things. So I think those things are just such good use of like being able to like, it's like the right, I'm not going to say it's the right, that's poor, poor of me. I'm going to say it is definitely a level of, you know, stuff that you want and the space that you want that works for me. Some people want more information. Some people want a lot less information.
Right.
But, you know, like for me, 2 Sides, 1 Epic, you guys did like the service, and like so much of the indie game space is around that like 1-page RPG or 1-page, you know, like settings and things like that. I will say that back in the letter, it said something about what is interesting to you. Is that what he said?
Yeah. What kind of pre-written adventures are interesting to you? What would you like to see in?
You find the thing that you love, whatever the fuck that is. For me, it was Star Frontiers at first. And I was like, oh, I want to run Star Frontiers. But you know what? That system sucks. There's no way I'm going to learn it and make people play that at the game convention because it was written in fucking 70 whatever, and it's not fun. And so I ran a Savage Worlds hack of it and made it fun in my way. And I felt like, wow, I got to run my game the way I wanted to run it. So I got inspired next by Fallout Shelter. And I'm like, okay, how do I do this? And given what I was inspired by at the time. So just find that shit that you love, whatever it is, whether it is a setting or a game system or, you know, some like, you know, cinema that you watch and you're like, how do I turn that into a game? And then figure that out. Maybe running another system, run it in 10 Candles if it's some horror thing, or Final Girl or whatever, you know, but find the thing that you love and then mash it with games in a way that feels fun. That's it.
There's one last question that was in here that Jonas sent, which is, do you have any pre-written adventures or campaigns you have run and liked? I have one that I played in that I liked, and I liked it for a specific reason. When we did the Savage Rifts game, the opening like scenario, Kadave ran that. It was like, it's the one that came with the book.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
And he did that specifically for viewers, right? It's like, oh, hey, if you bought this and you want to see what this scenario actually is like, that's how we're going to start, right? It also was good because getting into the world and stuff, it gave a lot of things there for those of us who hadn't played Rifts before. But the thing that was a requirement with that is that we got about halfway through the first session, and basically unknowingly I killed the big bad of the scenario. And so then Dave was like, oh, right. I guess we'll need to figure out how that changes the rest of the pre-written adventure, right? So you have to be able to roll with it if you do it, right? And I think that's the thing, is as the GM, like, you need to be able to just say, you know, no plan is going to survive meeting with my players. So at least I didn't do all this work that may get thrown out. And I'm going to have to improv just as much as when I'm doing my own stuff.
Right. I can't think of one that I played in or ran that I liked.
I have the same problem. I cannot think of a single module that I played in or ran that I enjoyed.
All right. There was one at Strategicon. There was a guy, I forgot his name. He hasn't shown up anytime recently. And he ran a Tomb of Horrors.
Oh, really?
Where you can just get resurrected over and over again with new NPCs or new like regens. So you basically like, we're running in and trying to figure it out. And of course we're going to die in like anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes, but then you get another character and you get to keep going knowing what you knew before. So it was all about like, we have 4 hours to play this game. Can we get through it throwing as many PCs as we can at it?
It's like you're a bowl of petunias.
Yeah. It was,
oh no.
I mean, like, look, that adventure for a regular party who's invested in their characters is horrible. But the way this was written was super fun. So, like, you know, sometimes you have to take that adventure and, like, turn some kind of, like, something sweet out of that horrible shit salad.
Oh.
My favorite salad. It's keto friendly.
I just went and looked because there's no link to Two Sides One Epic on the webpage anymore. Kimmy must have removed it, but the file is still in there. So I'll put up a link to it for anyone who wants to get it. It's free, and basically it was a kind of a contest. We had a bunch of listeners sent us one page adventures in whatever setting or system they wanted, or they were systemless, I think. And
then Tim, remember that guy?
Tim, which Tim?
The Tim. He had a contest which was like this similar thing. It came out years later.
Tim guy who used to be on the show, bald, big.
Did he do it? Did he
He
follow
could fall through a little bit.
There's a shocker.
He's not even here to defend himself. That's terrible.
That's what makes it easy and fun, Steve.
It is. All right. Well, that's it.
Wait.
Yeah.
Before we go, can I just? I mean, I'm not saying we're going, but like, oh my God, not just Jonas Larson, but did you hear him mention Uncommon Man?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just sorry, my love, Uncommon Man. You go way back.
Oh, by the way, I was wrong. His first email, he sent it December of 2012, and it was season 9, episode 2.
Mm.
And it was about...
I remember that show. It was a good show.
Was it? It's about a bunch of stuff. I think he tends to write emails with and hits a lot of topics. So, yeah, I saved all of the Google Docs for every episode of the show. I have all of them. I can search all of them on Google Drive.
You know what, Stu?
Yeah.
If we don't get any emails, just go back to the beginning. It's been long enough now. No one's going to.
You know what? You're right. That's not a bad idea. We'll do flashback episodes.
Well, but also we have a different perspective on games than we did 11 years ago.
Sure. Absolutely.
You just have to figure out what that time is where when you loop it, like everyone's talking about that game anyways, it's like the retro thing, and so no one will notice.
Right. And then it'll be great when we get to the crunch versus fluff debate. And then the like 8 or 9 episodes where everyone was sending emails in about
Every 12 years there will be a crunch versus fluff debate.
I'm looking through this because we limit the length of the show now. We don't do 2 or 3 hour shows anymore. But
Hey.
but I mean, back then I'm looking at some of these documents. We would read 9 emails because we'd read them all. We'd read all of them.
Yeah.
I was there.
By the time like the 8th internet or the 8th email came around, I think I was probably so blasted that I couldn't possibly even read it.
Absolutely. Oh, here's an email from Jeb from Postcards from the Dungeon, a fellow podcast that no longer exists. I'm just kind of going through memory lane now. Yehuda from Israel wrote in.
I remember Yehuda.
Yeah, and DT Pints, an epic from DT Pints, and it's almost 2 pages long. Yeah, it's amazing.
And they would just get read. Get read, man.
Can I ask who here has played with DT Pints?
I did briefly once.
Okay. I just want to say, like, that was one of the people you could actually play with from, like, JackerCon and stuff anytime.
Right.
Like, when you play JackerCon, he was, like, in over half the games.
Oh, yeah. I think there's a JackerCon coming up, isn't there?
Yeah, like
I'm
in
checking.
June or something? June or July? I can't remember when.
My God.
June
Did
26th.
we not talk about GameX yet?
No.
Oh, right, because there's the new virtual GameX, right?
Right.
We're only an hour and a half in, but Stu, you can splice this in the beginning, right?
Splice.
Yes, absolutely.
Dude, okay.
You're obviously a longtime viewer and listener of the show.
Editing? What? Edit?
If we could edit, we would look way smarter.
Holmes, let me remind you, edit is a 4-letter word.
That's right.
Fair. Okay, so it's not too late. The show hasn't ended quite yet. Let me at least jump in with GameX for a second?
Go.
Okay, so holy crap, guys, there's a global pandemic. Strategicon GameX has been, in some way, the physical convention canceled. You cannot spend a lot of money at the hotel. and get really shitty expensive food and then play lots of games. But what you can do, because there's now a virtual GameX, is you can still get the games. So fuck yeah, get on the strategicon.net site or whatever and register for free for virtual GameX. It is free. You heard me. You don't have to pay the normal registration fee. And then a Discord's going to be opening up in the next few days. It's basically like a hotel lobby. They have it broken up into different categories like board games and whatever the hell Strategicon does, including RPGs, which is us. And Games on Demand even has its own little space, different from the scheduled RPGs. So if there's something you like about Strategicon and you usually go. Make a weekend out of it. It's in a week and a half from now. Well, actually, a week from now.
Good call, man. I got the email on that, and I was so excited. I'm like, yes, this is super cool.
Man, make it fun. You've been in a pandemic for 2 months. This shit sucks. Everybody say it. So, like, here, you know what? Pretend you're in a hotel. Only call it Hotel Home, and then play these games online. Right?
It's awesome. You know what? I'll double pay my mortgage that month, and then I'll order Uber Eats maybe, just like the hotel. Expensive, crappy food that's overpriced.
No, here's what you do: you double pay your mortgage, and that covers your hotel and parking, or valet, and then you go on Uber Eats and order McDonald's, and then tip the guy $50, and then it's exactly the same experience.
It's the con, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And,
So I'm just saying.
And you can't start drinking until what, like 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. when the bar opens?
You can start drinking whenever you want at Virtual Con.
Yeah. Oh, but you have to wait 45 minutes for your drink.
So yes. Well, unless you're sitting at the right table, because the waitresses take care of us there.
Yeah, guess what? I don't have at home. A waitress taking care of me. That's what I'm saying.
I know, I'm pretty hungry now. Tomes has okonomiyaki in his background now. So, God damn it, Tomes.
At work, we have like our like Friday night, like go to the bar meetings, and a couple of us just keep rotating background images based on whatever the conversation's floating into. So today we were talking about okonomiyaki, and hence.
All right. Let's go ahead and call it. See, I meant to get like a big hammer and sickle behind me when I pull the green screen out, and I didn't have time to do it because I was going to have with a big flourish pull the flag and it'd be the don don. Anyway, maybe next week. But I just got this green screen. You can just kind of see over here in the corner. The is that Hawaii? I don't even know where that is.
That's classy.
That's
Let me tell you right now.
That's one of
you are running a top-notch organization there.
Ooh, I'm on the beach. All right.
We're listeners of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast.
Shit, where's the fader? There. God damn it. Thank you for joining us for season 26, episode 18 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
This is Tappy.
I am Bill.
And Tomes.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week at 7 p.m.-ish Pacific Daylight Time, right here, happyjacks.org/live. And thank you very much. We'll see you next week.
The preceding program has been a presentation of the Angry Folk Media Empire.